I actually used to live in Berlin, so I know the city pretty well. But even after moving away and coming back recently, I realized that there are so many things about Berlin that most visitors never figure out. So here are all the things I really wish I knew before visiting Berlin: the good, the bad, and the very weird. This was honestly the first thing that shocked me when I was in Berlin a few weeks ago. Berlin used to be like most of Europe, you know, you'd round up the bill and maybe leave €1 or €2 if the service was good. Now, well, literally every card machine pops up with that leave a tip option, and sometimes the waiter even asks you directly, and it's just a bit awkward. So, you know, maybe you've had a nice chat and then suddenly it turns into this transaction. So were you just being nice for that €5 tip or what? Some places are still cash only. You know, you'll be in a modern cafe full of laptops and oat milk, and when you go to pay, they point you to a handwritten cash only sign. So yeah, always carry a bit of cash in Berlin and get it from a proper bank ATM, because those Euronet ones, they will rob you in fees. The U-Bahn, the S-Bahn, trams, buses, they go everywhere in Berlin, and public transport here is clean, cheap and reliable. You know, you can actually cross half the city for just a few euros. But don't forget to validate your ticket. You have to stamp it in a little yellow machine before boarding, or you could download the BVG Tickets app and do it on your phone. Also, the ticket inspectors, they dress like normal people, so, you know, just buy the ticket and chill out. Spätis are where Berlin happens. They are these tiny corner shops that sell cold beer, snacks and just random essentials. But more importantly, they're actually social hubs. So here in Berlin, people just grab a drink and sit outside on these traditional Späti benches. And to be honest, this is something I miss from Berlin. And when I lived there, I actually had better nights outside a Späti than I did in some bars actually. Berliners, or maybe Germans in general, have completely normalized the whole walking beer thing. So you'll see people drinking on the U-Bahn and in parks and on the streets every day. And I think it's actually gotten illegal to drink on public transport, but people do it anyways. And it's not really a rebellion, it's just about freedom. You know, they actually trust you to be an adult in Berlin. It's such a chill, grown-up attitude compared to places where it's illegal to even hold a bottle outside. Berlin is massive, and I do mean massive. It's actually about 8 times the size of Paris, and each neighborhood feels completely different. You know, you got Kreuzberg, that's gritty and creative, Neukölln is chaotic and cool, and Prenzlauer Berg is brunch and baby strollers these days, but it's actually my favorite area. So don't try to see all of Berlin if you're just here for a few days. Maybe pick 1 or 2 areas per day and just explore. I used to live around here, and it's still my favorite area of Berlin. There are so many nice restaurants, cafes and bars, and unlike other parts of Berlin, there's actually quite a local feel around here. So when you're done at the Mauerpark flea market, head over to this part of Prenzlauer Berg instead of just walking down Kastanienallee with all the other tourists. That way you'll see a different side of Berlin. Berlin's club scene is iconic. You know, you've got Berghain, Sisyphos, Kit Kat Club, all very cool and legendary. But what nobody tells you is that you probably won't get in. You're just not cool enough, basically. And the bouncers in Berlin are brutal. You can queue for hours, get to the front, and then they'll just be like 9. No explanation, just bugger off. So always have a backup plan when you go out on the town in Berlin, or just go to a Späti. Berlin is generally super safe, but some parks, and especially Görlitzer Park, can feel a bit sketchy at night. It's known for open drug dealing, and you know, the atmosphere is just a bit weird. So if you're in Kreuzberg and you want something more relaxed, you could go over to Tempelhofer Feld instead. It's actually an old airport, Tempelhof Airport, turned into a public park where locals picnic and skate down the runway. So that's way more fun and a proper Berlin experience. If you ask someone over 60 for directions and they look a bit confused, it's not because they're rude or, maybe they are, it is Berlin after all, but it could also be because they grew up in East Germany where Russian and not English was actually taught in schools. So to me that's a bit fascinating when you think about it. You're talking to someone who literally lived through the division of the city. You don't have to go to museums to find history here, it's literally everywhere. Bullet holes in walls, pieces of the Berlin Wall tucked between buildings, and those plaques in the sidewalks called Stolpersteine, marking where Jewish families were taken during World War II. So if you're into history and especially World War II or Cold War era stuff, Berlin is the place to be. And if you're into history, this is one of the most powerful places in Berlin. The tours are often led by former inmates, which is intense but unforgettable, to be honest. You walk through cells, the interrogation rooms, and you realize that this isn't ancient history. This was happening just a few decades ago, where the socialist government literally tortured people right here in the heart of Europe. When I went there on a tour in high school, I felt sick afterwards, and it's still one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had on a trip. Alright, from heavy history to something way more practical. Nobody tells you this, but Berlin basically shuts down on Sundays. Shops, supermarkets, malls, all closed, It's mental coming from other European capitals where things are open 24/7, but that's just how Berlin works. So most restaurants and little corner shops, the Spätis, are actually open, and there are a few supermarkets inside the train stations mainly that are open, but that's it. So Berlin is just old school that way. Even inside shopping malls, the toilets aren't free. There's always this old lady standing there waiting for you to donate €0.50. Inside the East Side Mall, they do take card, but for example at Galeria Kaufhof at Alexanderplatz, it's cash only. Very Berlin. Berliners don't do small talk. And at first it might feel a bit cold. If you ask somebody, how are you? They might just tell you exactly how they are. Like, I have back pain and my girlfriend has left me to move to Leipzig. But once you adjust, it's to me, it's kind of refreshing, There's no fake friendliness, just straightforward honesty. And as a Scandinavian coming from cold Copenhagen, I kind of like that. And it definitely beats that whole, how are you? How are you? That pissed me off every day when I lived in the UK. Like, I'm fine, let's move on. It's raw, messy, full of contradictions and loads of graffiti. But once you stop comparing it to other cities, you realize just how real it is, Berlin doesn't care what you think, and that's what makes it brilliant. You'll see people walking around with these big glass bottles that look like beer, but it's actually Club Mate, a fizzy caffeinated tea. So if you've never had a mate before, it might be very weird, but give it 2 tries and you might get hooked. It's basically Berlin's version of coffee, especially after a long night out. Or on the long night out. Berlin transforms with the seasons, summer is just amazing with all the nice parks, rooftop bars and outdoor raves if you're into that kind of stuff. Winter is cold, dark and moody, and I'd highly recommend that you visit Berlin between May and September. I'd say 3 or 4 days is enough to see the city, but to actually feel it and get under the city's skin, you'll want a whole week. Especially if you're into museums and all the war stuff. Have you been to Berlin? What surprised you the most about the city? Let me know in the comments.